So yeah, I'm just gonna do this, and as soon as it's live, I'll share it and then introduce
Okay.
us. But we won't have anybody in there like within the first couple seconds anyway. But hopefully we get some more people in like last time.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this, especially with Gerard here.
I'm glad to be back. It's
Yeah, it's
been a little bit.
good to
Yeah,
have you here.
good to see you here, Matt.
I've been following, I've been tuning in. A couple great episodes. Great
That's
work,
awesome.
Dwayne, as always.
You've been keeping up to speed here.
Yep. I just
It's
read
gonna
that
get
one.
really cool, man, when we start talking about law. Fuck, man.
Exactly, and we're live right now,
Okay.
officially. We're just kind of getting things set up, so no, just wanted to let you know. But
Yep. Okay.
just going to just sending this link out as much as possible right now. I just wanted to edit it a little bit just to make sure everybody sees what's going on. But yeah, how have you guys been the past few weeks?
Busy,
Yeah.
very busy. I just did a 12-hour day. I got up at 4 a.m. and I went till 4 p.m. and then took a little bit of a nap to prepare for this. But we've been working pretty hard, just trying to get as much out as we can before we got to get back to the farm.
Hell yeah, man. Hard work, as always. Um, so yeah, we're gonna get into this in just a second. I really wanted to. I'm gonna have to have somebody help me with lives and figure this stuff out a little bit more. Just so I can, do this more efficiently.
Are we live on YouTube?
We're live right
Right.
now.
And so then you have over 1,000 subs, hey?
I
So
sure
can't you
do.
technically be
Oh, Dwayne? Did Dwayne
super
freeze up?
chats, donations,
Race back.
contributions?
Oh, there he is. There he is.
Feedback.
Yeah, I
Come
mean,
on.
I think
Is that right? Did I just freeze up just now?
You're back. You're back.
No,
Yeah, I
because I was
think
just saying that if you've got 1,000 subs, and you should be able to ask for donations, right?
I believe I can. I believe someone was generous enough on our part one to. I think they donated $2
Okay,
or something
cool.
like that.
Right on.
I'm so new to it too,
Hey,
so
that's
I'm
something.
just not used to it at all.
I think they
So
take 30%.
that's
Yeah, I
I
wouldn't
would
doubt it.
guarantee.
YouTube probably more.
Yeah,
I think it's at least 30% or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Sorry for the delay, guys. I just wanted to make sure I could share this back
okay.
to my socials and stuff. I know that usually people can just save this all day and send out the link early, but I'm new to this and I've tried. Things don't go the right way. So I'm sending
We'll
it out
figure it out
now.
over time.
Absolutely. So
That's how you
now
do it, man.
I got the links out. Everything's good. So whoever's going to be tuning in will see the links and come on in and join us for this. But if you are just joining us, this is part 3 of the Rise of the Expert series. But really, when we named that, I don't think, not that we named it inappropriately, but it's so much bigger than just the expert,
Yeah.
the rise of the social contract, the rise
Yeah.
of so many clandestine things
Mhm.
that are now coming to light. And I'm joined again by, of course, Bulletproof Publishers, Dwayne Hayes, and for the first time in a long time, Andy Gerard. How's it going, Andy?
Doing well, man. Glad to be back. Thanks for having me. Always enjoy being on a panel with you guys and looking forward to talking about Zionism today.
Yes.
This is going to be a big one. This is where we're getting in
Yes.
pretty deep. And
Yeah.
Dwayne has provided a lot of data and forensic evidence for
Mhm.
what has happened over the course of many decades, and it's
Yep.
all been coming to fruition, and it's a long time coming. And
Mhm.
this is a major piece, this series. So please go
Mhm.
back and watch parts 1 and 2. It's not only on YouTube but on the podcast feed as well. So, but yeah,
Mhm.
whenever we're ready, we can just dive right into part 3,
Sure.
Dwayne. However
Okay.
you want to introduce it.
Yeah. So I think we should probably just quickly cover what we did in parts 1 and 2, just to sort of help people grasp how influential Louis Brandeis was. So in part one, he's really considered the architect of the new freedom. So he was the most trusted personal advisor of Woodrow Wilson.
Oh, it's freezing again.
Yeah, that might happen a couple times.
So Trains Bank, life insurance,
There he
and
is.
about 100 other things. Sorry.
Yeah,
You
you
froze
froze up
there.
for a second.
Yeah.
Hopefully that won't keep happening. It only happened once
Yeah.
last time, and it was brief and early on. So
Yeah, the
Yeah.
last two streams were pretty good. So I mean,
they're trying to get us.
I routinely get issues, but generally it's at the beginning, and then for whatever reason, everything smooths out. But I do have internet issues here at home for whatever reason over the last year or so.
I figured if they're
So
trying to
bear
take
with
us
me.
off the internet at all, if we start getting those kind of vibes, we'll just switch
Mhm.
over to mythology and Dogman and all kind of mythological
Right,
creatures
right,
that
right.
are like satanic and coming to get us or something. Then the algorithm will just push us to everyone in the alternative community. So I should
So-
name it that way. We won't even name it Brandeis. We'll name it something
Right.
like something fear porny.
Yeah, well, I could actually go on for quite a while talking about, how much suppression's on our site and me personally whenever I try to mention this guy. And I really do believe
Right.
that this is the gate that is being kept. So, everybody's trying to figure out who the gatekeepers are. It's pretty easy when you figure out the information that they're trying to keep. You don't have to worry about who it is anymore. So I don't know where I was cut off there, but he's the architect of new freedom. So he creates the administrative state, which is really the welfare state when you break it all down. And so he's hanging out with the father of the welfare state too. And so we went over that in part one, how he infiltrates the Wilson administration, creates the Federal Reserve Board, the Federal Trade Commission, savings bank, life insurance, and 100 other aspects to the administrative state. And so what this is what Lippmann called the Great Society, and he wanted it run by intelligence bureaus. And in each intelligence bureau, they'd be run by an expert. And this is how they wanted society to run. This was their idea to world wars, and material force of arms was an international force of law, and not just the United States and Western world, but the entire world to be run by the scientific expert. And so, we started researching all of this, got through part one, and then we realized that he's the coiner of the term scientific management. So when we talk about labor unions and the creation of labor unions, and there was major labor wars back in this time too, because people weren't really wanting to go back or to go into factories and to work. They were happy on their homesteads or in their other lives prior to this international push. So
Got another freeze up. He'll be back in just a second. It seems like it's not too much of a delay. Hopefully. Unless they finally got us.
I was thinking if there was a topic, it might be this one.
Right? I mean,
Given
I
the
didn't
given the
put-
climate.
yeah, I didn't put Dwayne's like subtitle in the YouTube title. I just named it Rise of the Expert Part 3. But it's, the creation of Israel, American Zionism. Dwayne is dead in the water right now.
It's frozen.
He's totally frozen. Oh, and now he's gone. So I think he's probably going to be coming back in. There he is. Here he is.
okay.
Back and more
Wow.
powerful.
Okay, so I'm just going to keep going. I don't know where I got cut off there.
Oh man, well we can definitely. It was in like 30 seconds. You got cut off. We were just getting
Seriously?
into it.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
it's rough.
I don't know what to say if it continues. I'll just
I know.
keep trying to persevere, and
Absolutely.
you can do what you can do there. It could just be my own internet connection. Sometimes it can be a little bit funky. So,
More times than not, it's that and not the CIA. So
right. So I'm going to share screen and we're going to get into this. So
let's do it.
for those that aren't familiar with some of this, definitely go back and read part 1 and 2. Do you guys see Brandeis part 3, American Zionism and the Making of Israel there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We made it that far. We got his face on the internet. That is one huge step. I love seeing him, being talked about because it's nearly impossible to find anybody talking about him. Yet he is.
Yeah, that's the weird part, man. I've been
influential.
I've been mentioning him and talking about him, obviously promoting our series here, but at the same time, like a lot of times I'm just kind of getting like I'm getting responses as if I'm showing a dog a magic trick or something. Like, huh? Like who? What?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Supreme Court justice? Like, all
Yeah.
right, whatever. Like, oh,
Yeah, well,
Zionism. Okay.
right.
Like,
Well, if just on a basic level, that's why we started with one. His infiltration of the U.S. at the 3 branches of the U.S. government: the judicial, the executive, and the legislative. So that's really, he took over all 3 through being a lawyer and an attorney and a Supreme Court justice, and then the personal advisor to Wilson. And
he
so
set the standard.
yeah, he's very influential. And so it's quite a little twist that he does here. And at the same time, he does an about face about his background is the same time that Woodrow Wilson does his about face and goes to war. The second election, he was elected largely on his promise that they weren't going to get into war, and 4 months after they were. And so there's an about face there that is totally synchronized between Brandeis and Wilson, and historians generally, especially the mainstreamers, sit there confounded as to how this is possible. But you can easily see once you get into it that it's all coordinated, and it's coordinated by this guy. So he's a non-practicing Jew who did not believe in religion. He became head of the American Zionist movement in his 6th decade. So he was just about 60 years old when he transformed the Zionist movement from a moribund sideshow into a powerful component of American Jewish life. So Brandeis met with Woodrow Wilson for the very first time on August 28th, 1912 at Seagirt, New Jersey, to discuss Brandeis's reform ideas. So this is about 3 months before Wilson gets nominated. Brandeis comes aboard and starts running his campaign, and it's all under the new freedom. So Brandeis, and so what this means is Brandeis met both Wilson and DeHaas in the same month, just prior to Wilson's election. So DeHaas is really the guy that mainstream accounts will tell you inspired Brandeis to Zionism, but as you'll see here, he was influenced a long time before that.
Right.
But he really got active after he was meeting with DeHaas. So that's within the same 2 weeks, Brandeis meets for the first time Woodrow Wilson and Jacob DeHaas. So his sudden interest in Zionism, according to the mainstream, was sparked by his first meeting with Jacob DeHaas. DeHaas was, a secretary to Theodore Herzl, close personal advisor and friend, and moves to Boston on his advice. DeHaas does. God. And so he becomes the editor of the Boston Jewish Advocate and the Boston Jewish Chronicle, and inspires Brandeis with harrowing tales of both Lewis's Zionist uncle, Louis Naphtali Dembitz, and Theodore Herzl. So Brandeis had long before been introduced to the Jewish problem. As we will show you, 5 years before DeHaas, he's making a speech at the New Century Club in Boston commemorating the 250th anniversary of the first ever Jewish settlement, entitled "What Loyalty Demands." So he's writing speeches long before this. Okay, so we're already breaking history right there. You'd have to go outside the sort of milieu of the circle of official biographers that surround Brandeis, like they do with Lippmann and everybody else. There's about 5 or 6 that sit between themselves and contemplate the history of these historic figures. And so they act as gatekeepers themselves. because there's all kinds of incredible information in there that they just kind of, glaze over at.
Right.
Starting with the fact that he's a Supreme Court justice, but he's a radical social reformer.
Yeah.
That's really what the reasons behind his opposition. That's why his confirmation took nearly 6 months, is because not because of his Jewish background, but because he was a radical. These things were far more known then than they are now, certainly. And so we've got a quote here from him, and this is when he was interviewed by DeHaas before this legendary meeting. So I don't know why they try to push that narrative when there's so much provenance showing that DeHaas actually himself met Brandeis long before that. And here's where Brandeis says in an interview with DeHaas in the Jewish Chronicle that I have a great deal of sympathy with the Zionists. The movement is an exceedingly deserving one. These so-called dreamers are entitled to the respect and appreciation of the entire Jewish people. So he joins the Federation of American Zionism, FAZ. And it's also here during this time while he was nearing his 60s that Brandeis changes his middle name in honor of his Zionist uncle from David to Dembitz.
And yeah, we have a prominent Frankist, being sympathetic to Zionism, which is really problematic.
And did we cover
especially
this
with his prominence? And yeah, a little bit, yes.
Well, no, the aspect that his dad came to North America with a Rothschild agent, we covered that in part 1, I believe, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because that was a late.
You did.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Thank you, Andy.
It was a late piece. It was a late artifact that I found, and so we're busy researching that now. But it looks like he's a Rothschild agent from the beginning. This is, because his father comes over before Louis is even born.
Right.
So, and
we know
and
this plan has been carried out long before.
Yeah.
Well, didn't we also say that Louis' parents were also Frankists?
Yeah, and his great grandfather. It's a long line of Frankism
of all
going
believing
on there.
that like Moshiach is coming, basically.
Well,
in
I don't
some
know if
twisted,
that's what it
fucked up,
is,
backwards way. I don't know.
but it's antinomial. Antinomial. It's a what do you say?
I don't know.
Frankism. It's a degenerate. It's not religion, but it's a degenerate form of, it's a movement against morals and ethics, really. We've covered that already.
Yeah,
and that's,
we have.
it's documented. So,
yeah, I didn't mean to take us down that little.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
So Brandeis on August 30th, 1914 becomes the leader of international Zionism when he's elected the chairman of the Provisional Executive Committee for General Zionist Affairs. Now, what that is the headquarters of the international Zionist movement in Berlin gets moved out of there because there's a war. And so very much like World War II, right? In the 30s with the emergency committee in aid of foreign scholars. Same thing happens 20 years earlier with this Provisional Executive Committee for General Zionist Affairs. They move international Zionism to New York and name Brandeis the chairman of it. So you can go forward now saying that Brandeis was the head of international Zionism until about 1921 when him and Chaim Weizmann have a big debate and they break, and Brandeis goes on his own with his own lieutenants, and we'll get into those guys now.
Excellent.
But he's far more influential than Weizmann and Herzl and everybody else.
It's unbelievable.
So in March of 1915, Brandeis, along with Stephen Weiss and Julian Mack, would establish the Jewish Congress Organization Committee. And in 1917, 2 months after America enters the First World War, Brandeis was elected honorary chair of the National Executive Committee that was the precursor to the American Jewish Congress. So he's got his hands in everywhere. When you think about it, he's exactly what Chaim Weizmann wants. This is why Weizmann kisses his hand, is because he wants American support, especially the rich Jew support. And so, and the American president, of course. And so Brandeis has both in his back pocket. And this is why Brandeis is so important. So him and his lieutenants willingly involved themselves in many other lesser known, but no less important Jewish organizations like the Jewish Agricultural Experiment Station. Now that's developing agriculture in Palestine. So they're establishing the infrastructure, the necessary infrastructure, the irrigation, and all of those things. So along with Mac, Marshall, Schiff, and Weiss, we're all members of this advisory board of the Hebrew Sheltering and Immigrant Aid Society. So you start to see how they're funding the they're accepting donations from 3 separate Jewish demographics, and then they're just funneling it straight to Palestine, and they're building infrastructure there. And so it's really through this Palestine Cooperative Company Incorporated. It's run by Bernard Flexner and Robert Zold. Okay. So the Flexner brothers, they're creating the medical industry at the same time.
Wow.
Right, through the Rockefeller Medical Institute. And there's, the Flexners are just like the Warburgs, who are just like the Baruchs, who are just like the Rothschilds, really, in that they have a father who has a bunch of sons, and they go off and lead different movements in the same direction, but they're authorities of different things. And so you see that with the Flexners, in that one is starting, Western medicine.
Yeah.
And the other one's here creating Israel with the Supreme Court justice.
It's unreal. I don't know why this is so obtuse, but like it reminds me of the Maxwell, the Maxwell family. You got like father in Mossad, and then you got like one daughter involved with Epstein. You got another daughter involved with like tech, or 2 of them involved with tech. It's just
deep tech too.
These families, going together like this.
Yeah. And so I got tons of provenance too, tons of receipts I couldn't put into this presentation.
Oh shit. As soon as he mentioned having more receipts
that I can't put in all of my presentations. So if anybody's like, hey, I want to see more, just come find me. I'll load you up, because there's
absolutely
tons. The one
as we will continuously promote is bulletproofpub.com.
Yeah.
Go to bulletproofpub.com, read the articles yourself, see all the citations.
Yeah. Yeah. And the one thing that we've realized here is that this history isn't totally obscured. It's really wasn't that hard to find. It's just there. If you know where to look and how to do it, you'll find it. It's not like this information's been scrubbed from the internet. I'm not sure if they just don't expect us to find it or what.
I think that's it. I think it's the way we look at it, right? Because how many times have I had to stop us, just like for the general audience, or even myself sometimes, to go, yeah, this is like meant to look really positive, right? Because it's sometimes at first it's hard to see, like, well, wait, this is all good things that they're, no, it's not, no, it's all the blanket, of course, as always, you know what I mean? So it's like the way it's presented has been in plain sight, as everything usually is. People might say, oh, they want us, they need to tell us first, some karmic thing. Yeah. That doesn't even have to be it. It can be an ego thing. They're telling us because they're confident that we'll be brainwashed by the time we find it and be applauding it.
Yeah. And so, we find stuff like this. This is a picture of the Palestine Economic Corporation, which is what this Robert Zold Flexner company turns into. And then with the with the executive relief aspect. So that's 2 parts of this overall corporation meeting at this table. Now, Brandeis was the head of both of these, but he's not in the picture. And I like to say that he was the one taking the picture, but there's no way that that's happening.
Oh man.
He's the only one really missing here, right? But I'll show you here as we go that he writes a letter to the guy with the big mustache. That's a Warburg.
Definitely a Warburg right there. Yeah. Definitely.
And he steps down from his Zionist connections, from this joint distribution committee and the rest of his Zionist affairs. He goes kind of underground because he's the Supreme Court justice now, and he waits until It's a few months after he's confirmed that he writes a letter to Warburg stating that he's got to drop all of his titles to do with Zionism. But it's all of these guys here, his lieutenants, are the ones that carry out all of the work, and it's all Brandeisian designed, and they all admit it, and I'll show you. Now, what's interesting about this picture is that this is a real one, and this is a painting of it. And because Louis Marshall, the guy on the far left there, wasn't at this meeting, they decided they were going to make a painting and put him in there. But there's also an interesting addition of a globe and another guy standing onto the left. And the guy that was up front in Louis Marshall's spot is now way in the back. You can see him with the beard. And then that's a picture of Lincoln, I think, on the wall. Okay, so that's important too, because this all goes back through these guys, this progressive movement. You know, we've talked about being even a part of Manifest Destiny, right? So this goes way back through, Lincoln's time and further back even than that. But I just found it interesting that they put a picture of Lincoln on the wall.
Yeah, they changed a few key aspects of this.
And why the
clearly
globe?
Very important picture. Yeah, that's very interesting. We could analyze that for days.
Yeah.
I mean, we could analyze every part of the table.
So yeah, we have Jacob Schiff on the right and Warburg on the left, and then Louis Marshall in the left corner. These guys are huge names. Jacob Schiff is probably the face of American Jewry, or New York Jewry for sure.
High finance, yeah.
Yeah, he's funding Trotsky.
Federal Reserve.
This guy's a serious piece of business, man.
Yeah, that's a big picture right there.
Yeah,
Power.
and Brandeis is telling them all what to do. Right?
Yeah, that's something to think about.
So now we all know about Schiff and we know about Warburg, but Brandeis is leading them all. He's leading the international Zionist movement in the name of Theodor Herzl. And so, people think that Theodor Herzl is the father of Zionism. It's actually not. It's a Christian evangelical dispensationalist. William Eugene Blackstone, he wrote the 1891 Blackstone Memorial Petition, and this is going back to then, and he was talking about the pogroms that were going on in Central Europe, and he was really trying to get the attention of the American president at that time, President Harrison, and he didn't pay it any attention. But Brandeis came across this document in 1916 and had him present it to Wilson, and this is a big part of why Israel is today.
Wow.
So
that's unreal.
July 10th, 1918 meeting of the Joint Distribution Committee and the executives of the American Jewish Relief Committee, 52 William Street, New York. So there's a list of the people that are there. So the JDC, the Joint Distribution Committee, distributed tens of millions to the early construction efforts in Palestine through the wartime donations of 3 distinct communities to supply capital and credit, assuming a credit structure where none had existed before. And its first prospectus stated that the company recognized that the extension of credit facilities was a first vital necessity in Palestine and of the utmost consequence in its economic upbuilding. So credit, they needed to be able to give people credit so that they can build things there. So nobody should be surprised with that it's Schiff and these guys doing that, and they're lending money out at interest. At the same time, he's creating the Federal Reserve, which lends money to governments at interest. So you can see that they're just using the same design plan, but on larger and smaller scales. And as you understand this more and more, as we get into later weeks, you'll see that this is really the creation of our social contract.
Oh my God. This is unreal as it's coming together.
So the American Jewish Committee targeted for funds already settled American Jews, while the Central Relief Committee looked to the new Jewish immigrant and the Union of Jewish Orthodox Congregations for funding. And the People's Relief Committee solicited Jewish labor and socialist groups like the Amalgamated Clothing Workers or the Federation of Jewish Farmers. So they've got 3 different demographics that they're targeting, and they're appealing to each one of those in a different sort of way to get funding for the creation of Israel and Palestine. And so this is before, this will be before, during, and after the publication of the Balfour Declaration. So
Wow,
Brandeis
that's
created the
unreal.
Palestine. Yeah. So he creates the Palestine Economic Corporation with Bernard Flexner, Julius Simon, Robert Zold. And actually, Robert Zold's wife is the one that creates Haganah or Haganah. That's the female, the women's American Jewish organization. Okay, so we have women in here involved too.
Yeah, I noticed that in the picture. We had
Yeah.
I think two women.
Mm-hmm. And so they create the Women's Zionist Organization of America to complement the real one or
Wow.
the big one. And so within that corporation were formed the necessary institutions and utilities to begin establishing the necessary infrastructure for a working Jewish community in Palestine. The Central Bank of Cooperative Institutions in Palestine Limited, the Economic Board for Palestine of London, the Palestine Jewish Colonization Association, that's Rothschild, and Palestine Mortgage and Credit Bank Limited, the PEC, working in conjunction with both Baron de Rothschild's PICA and the Jewish Agency, constructed modern methods of agriculture at a time when industry was largely non-existent in the area. The PEC grew their pioneering country in such fields as credit for agricultural and industrial enterprise, housing, provision, town planning, and water supply. So there's another Baron here too that's involved, Baron de Hirsch. And I'm not sure if I mentioned him, but the Jewish Agency is what he's involved in with Chaim Weitzman. So you have Brandeis and his group, the Brandeis group, running the Palestine Economic Corporation. And within that organization, you have, actually, it's not within those. This is another organization that combines with it. So it's a concerted effort with PICA, which is the Palestine Israeli Colonization Association. So we're talking about colonization of Palestine. So if anybody's out there saying, oh, it wasn't called Palestine before, some of these tropes that are going on die here, right? We break that history here because we're showing that, they called it Palestine when they went over there, when Rothschild went there to colonize it, he called it Palestine.
Right.
It's just an old tired trope that deserves to die, and it is now, right?
Needs to be
because
dead.
it's bullshit. They went over there with the intent to infiltrate, create a conclave, and we see the results 100 years later. There's no doubt because we have hindsight.
It's unreal
So-
too. Just to bring something in recently, I came across, not even looking for it, but I came across a quote from Woodrow Wilson all the way in 1919. What year are we at right now? We're not there yet.
Yeah,
are
well,
we?
not there yet, but we're right there. 1917, 1916.
And I'm sure I'll repeat this either later or maybe in a future episode, but I'll say it. I'll quote him right now from 1919. I am
Do it.
a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is now controlled by its system of credit. We are no longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men. I wonder who he's talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ding, ding,
And
ding.
what's amazing, Andy, is that when I first started looking into this era, that was one thing that nobody could really source and find receipts for. It was just something that generally was said,
Mm-hmm.
but now we're showing how it actually happened, that is true, that Wilson was controlled by a secretive group, and this is really where the deep state takeover was in modern times. I mean, they were talking about it under Trump and all of that, but this is really showing that this is the first time that Harvard scholars and intellects were the chosen advisors for a president over his own administration. And so in weeks 8, 9, and 10, we're going to talk about how that all turned international, because the first 4 years of Brandeis was domestic, right?
Right.
Federal Reserve, the Federal Trade Commission, that was all domestic to make America so it would fit with a international model, is what I see. If they were going to make internationalism a thing and have America dominate the 20th century and be the leader there, they had to first make America able to fit well with the international model. So that's
Right.
what I see. In the first 4 years, they got busy. Right after he was elected in 1912, they just started going for it. 1913, they made the Federal Reserve and the creation of the welfare state, like I said. So, and then they move on to the international side. And it really starts here, 1917, because this is when he's also creating the Inquiry, the first ever experts to advise Woodrow Wilson at the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. They start collecting all of their information in 1917, right at the same time. So he's got his hands in so many things. It's hard to even understand how he's doing it. You know,
Yeah.
he's infiltrated so many circles of people at the same time, and he's manipulating them all in the same direction. And so through their various subsidiaries, the PEC facilitated growth through credit programs, loans for low-cost housing in rural and urban areas. The PEC was deeply involved in questions regarding the country's water supply, making significant contributions to the supply problem by implementing improved technical methods and the establishment of centralized and systematic irrigation plants. So they're serious.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's a great quote, and that's why I made it larger. The colony had been carefully planned by Pica, that's Rothschild, in cooperation with the Palestine Economic Corporation, that's Brandeis, and the Jewish Agency, that is Chaim Weizmann. So those are your three big faces of the creation of Israel, despite, what many will say.
Right.
And Brandeis sneaks under the radar somehow, and he's done so for 100 years. I find it just the most amazing thing. And, I had my buddy Doug McKenty from The Shift suggest to me the other day, he's not the first one to say it. And this is something that I believe that we are ahead of our time here. And we're waiting for people to catch up, because this is very significant information. This is really showing the source of everything that is confounding us today. And they've been very successful in keeping it quiet.
The Balfour Declaration is really the only thing that gets passed around and hashtagged in a way, in that sense, on social media, in alternative circles, when it comes to this point in time, this event. And it's interesting how, that's a part of it, of course, but there's so much more to it that's just not discussed at all. And as you've told me in the past, that there's been points where people get near it and then don't go there.
Yes.
And when you inform them, communication tends to stop.
Yeah, I'm getting it's amazing. I've been putting out videos showing how suppressed I am on YouTube. I'm trying to contact an old neighbor of mine who happens to be, a fairly large YouTube guy. The urban farmer, Curtis Stone. And, you went there to support me, and even your comments got deleted. Did you see that?
Did they? I did not. I didn't have a chance to go back and look.
Yep. And so I can't even really say anything. And so I'm trying to get him to give me his email address, or just to find me on Facebook, because then we can directly communicate. But it's been
I could reach out to him too, independently, and just say, hey, listen, because I'm interested in the stuff that he talks about anyway,
Yep. But, and he's been a huge help for us, right, in our urban farming. He was an inspiration too, but he's helped us in finding all kinds of things to help us.
Real quick, I just wanted to address the live audience. First of all, hi. I really appreciate you guys
everybody.
being here. This is our third live. This is my third live ever. And we got 14 people watching. That's 14 more than I expect. And I'm so appreciative of that. And big shout out to C Truth for the super chat. I hope I don't even know what I'm supposed to do, but hopefully that's, I don't even know, but thank you. And shout out to everybody who's here. Dustin Wilson said, and this is my word guy. He gets into all sorts of language stuff, and this is
etymology.
He was, absolutely. And he was showing how brand means fire and ice, brand ice. So you got fire and ice. And this is just such an interesting concept that just permeates everything. So, and look at that, just like Israel, Israel. Yeah. Very interesting.
And so the last name there, Brandeis, is important because they come from a place called Brandeis on the Elbe. Like the city's named after them. And what I've
That's
found
right.
in my research is that there's a whole other family of Brandeis in central the United States, uh, developing, doing things just kind of the same as Louis Brandeis. And
Really? Are they
I
related
just
or not?
haven't had the time to connect them to see if they're related or not, but I would assume that they are at this point because Brandeis, it's a fairly unique name, and it they're named Brandeis because they come from this place in Bohemia called Brandeis on the Elbe, right on the River Elbe.
Oh
So yeah.
man, the pieces just get juicier and juicier, man.
So here, after being nominated to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1916, Brandeis wrote to Felix Warburg at the New York offices of the American Jewish Relief Committee. I regret that I feel compelled to resign from the Executive Committee of the American Jewish Relief Committee, and of course also from the Joint Distribution Committee. So he's saying right there, he's stepping down from the two groups that we have that picture of. To avoid negative public perception, yet Brandeis still very much wielded authority from behind the scenes with an invisible leadership. So there's sources there, but we do get to that page. So through his closest lieutenants, Julian W. Mack, Stephen Weiss, Bernard Flexner, Jacob de Haas, Felix Frankfurter, and Robert Zold, hereinafter referred to as the Brandeis Group, this inner hardcore group were all American educated, a majority being also American born. All were university educated, most were lawyers, and most of the lawyers had attended Harvard. A majority also became Zionists after 1914. So a lot of these guys, one thing that we're also showing, and we will show in the sociological jurisprudence one, it may be next week, is how everything comes from Prussia. And it's no different here. Right?
Yep.
So
there's so much history going on involving Prussia at the heart of it that
yeah,
it's not talked about.
Yeah, this is real key, and we'll start to delve into that when we start to talk law, because the founders of sociology come back from Prussian universities. Because at this time, America, it has universities and colleges and places of education, but not this kind of specialized intelligence. So the only place it's being offered is in Prussia. And we're seeing not just this founders of sociology, but the founders of psychology, the founders of psychiatry, the very founders of our whole entire Western education system. They go over to Prussia, they study at Leipzig under some huge names in philosophy, and then come back with that school of thought and impose it into America.
And again, I know I've mentioned it before. I don't know if it was in this series or not, but it's just very convenient that this is the same source that was destroyed or in pure opposition to what eventually becomes the Thule Society, but it wasn't called the Thule Society way back then. This is we've discussed this 1806, a very interesting year.
Yes.
And we can we will be digging into this further as the series continues.
Yeah, because that's the Prussian Reformation, 1806.
Bingo. And it's also the first inception of this Thule Society that was in opposition to all of that, I think.
And as an answer
very interesting.
As an answer to being beat by Napoleon, they totally reform every aspect of their government. Well, their entire country, everything, military, education, all of it. And then all of that comes over to America. I kid you not. It's quite amazing.
We have a major motion picture from Hollywood, a knighted director, of course, doing Napoleon recently.
Right.
I haven't seen it, and I don't really think there's going to be much to be gained there other than...
Well, and you see what the mainstream is contemplating right now about that movie, because he always has his hand hidden. And so they have raised this question, why is Napoleon's hand always hidden? And so they contemplate whether it was a hand abnormality or some sort of thing that happened in war. And it's like, he's hiding it because he's a Freemason.
Right.
And he's sending a message through the imagery, man. Come on.
I think it's worth too just to note the Frankfurter connection there with Zionism. So we're seeing the crossover and the connections between Marxism and Zionism, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's just worth pointing that out for the audience, as sometimes, we get new viewers and things like that. So Felix Frankfurter, huge name, the Frankfurt School,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
the
that's
Marxist
not
thought.
him. Felix Frankfurter he's the protege for Louis Brandeis. Frankfurt School is not named after him,
Okay, okay,
but
okay.
what he does is carry on the Brandeisian school of thought. Because he's a lot younger than Brandeis, so you see him actually follow in Brandeis's footsteps. And this is, Felix Frankfurter. If you want to know about the creation of Israel, he's another figure that's, you know, um, very obscure and should be enjoying a little bit more publicity about his involvement in the creation of Israel for certain, because he had his toe in every delegation in Paris and creating that thing. It's very influential, and he's pushing forward the Brandeisian idea after, because Brandeis is a Supreme Court justice, and he's already looked at as radical, so he knows that he has to kind of keep low and out of the public eye. And so
Right.
Frankfurt is the perfect guy. He's his leading lieutenant.
His little puppet. Our friend
But
Brandy says, looks like the Talpiot programs follow the same educational funnel. And then old Omerchu says, the Tavistock gang started in Prussia. And that's a really good point.
right. And Tavistock is totally connected to the cybernetic movement in America, like direct
Bingo.
connect. So we're talking about social science and the study of human beings when we're talking about cybernetics and Tavistock, and this is the origins of it right here. These are the guys these are the first ever social scientists. This comes from Prussia, social science. This is Auguste Comte is the father of sociology. This is where it comes from, and sociology was the first social science. So, and what is social science but the study of the human being?
Bingo.
In every aspect. So when you want to know, and this is what led us to all of this, because I was looking at a thing like the Council on Foreign Relations and going, this is pretty harmful to us, having lobbyists that are able to make legislative changes on the power of money. This should probably be something we should look into, the origins of. And sure shit, here we are. This is what we uncover when we go look at the seedy origins of a organization like the Council on Foreign Relations. And so
Oh, you mentioned the CFR gets mentioned, and Dwayne is
he's
immediately
one guy that
there.
I only figured out. Sorry,
you mentioned the CFR, and you got cut for a second, but no, it must be just a coincidence. I think you're here. You're back.
hello, check 1 2 testing.
Check.
Are we there? Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, I'll just keep going.
Sure. Plow through, brother.
So I already explained how he stepped down. So there's a source there. If you want to chase that, it's number 11 at the bottom. So that's not just me writing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then source 12, as head of the American Zionist movement, Brandeis did not and could not act alone, especially after his nomination to the Supreme Court in 1916, when for technical reasons, as well as matters of principle, like this man is made of principles, his personal participation in the movement was limited. So you can see it's just a front.
Yeah.
He's still running international Zionism from 1914 to 1921, hands down. So the Brandeis group led the American Zionist movement and made the major decisions, always in contact with Brandeis. Now, these are legitimate sources. These will be his biographers and dissertations written in higher levels of education, because this is where they will actually reveal a lot of this history, is in, the dissertations for Master of Arts degrees.
This is unreal. This flyer on the left here, the
Yeah.
aims of the Zionist
Right.
movement. This is so this is 1915, and how many years previous was he just simply saying, "Oh, I sympathize with these Zionists," and suddenly he's
Overnight.
doing this big lecture. Yeah, man.
Literally
This big lecture.
overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a great receipt, right? It shows that he's out there and he's doing all kinds of speeches. This is just one, but it shows it's got the date and, you know, his title, chairman of the executive committee for general Zionist affairs. You know, that's international Zionism. That's
These are your
basically
scientific managers
yeah,
of
you know,
the world right now.
yes. So it couldn't be more relevant actually today, right?
Absolutely.
If we knew our history, we wouldn't be repeating it certainly right now. So through his associates, Brandeis held the Zionist organization in a tight grip. From Louis Brandeis around World War I to Abba Hillel Silver after World War II, Zionism has been defined as a form of American liberalism. Now, here's a real great twist in all of this, and it's something that once you wrap your head around, you can really start to see that they're going after dual loyalty. So we talked about this in our messenger chat earlier today of dual loyalty and how this is a necessary tool in getting, you know, American Christians and Americans to support
I don't even want to interrupt. He'll be back in a second. Hopefully. Again, shout out to everybody here. Keep the comments coming. Man, Dwayne got hit hard this time, I guess. I don't know. Could be his internet. Andy, I still got you, right?
Yes, sir.
Cool. What do you think so far? Well, we don't have Dwayne.
Very thorough, interesting.
Again, nothing surprising, really. Just
No,
informative
not at all.
and confirmation.
It's been a lot of, I mean, this particular episode is right in line. I've been digging into Jewish thought, Judaism, you know, given everything that's front and center right now with the Israel-Palestine conflict and everything. And I've been watching and paying attention to Adam Green and a couple other people that are exposing Zionism and Judaism. And it's so deep, dude. Like,
Yeah.
it's not just like this political goal of some of these very influential people like Brandeis and Herzl, and there's all these Kabbalists in the background as well that have these just insane beliefs, insane goals, these messianic goals to bring forth the Moshiach, and a lot of their literature gets into, like, you know, a lot of praise going around right now for like these anti-Zionist Orthodox Jews and stuff, and you start to learn about what they believe, and you see that it's even more extreme than the Zionists. And
Right.
I had a little video clip to, I don't know if we can work that in at some point, but it's the anti-Zionist Orthodox Jews, the really devoted ones. They're way more insane in their beliefs and what their goals are than what the Zionists actually believe, like the secular Zionists. And I've been learning a lot about that recently. And so, yeah, Dwayne's work here is just putting some more pieces to the puzzle. And
Yeah, absolutely.
it's
Am I back?
incredible work. Yeah, you're
You
back.
are. You're
See me?
fine. Sorry, I didn't acknowledge.
Good.
Yeah, you just
No,
got
it's all
back
good.
about 10 seconds ago. You got kicked.
Okay.
Yeah, real bad.
You were about to say dual loyalty. You got
Yeah,
caught there.
Really?
Just about to talk about dual loyalty.
And you were
So
about to say
we can chalk it up to
Christians.
Okay.
How do we get Christians, American Christians,
American
to
liberalism.
Right. Yep. So
We've been really we've been getting kicked every time you mention something interesting. So
yeah.
I don't know what to tell you, but there's a pattern forming. And it's
There
been
is a
going
pattern
on for
forming.
quite a while with me. You know, and when I record them on YouTube and show that my comments are being erased. It's, it's pretty demonstrable.
And it's so fast too. I mean, I think this is a whole different discussion, of course, but I think it's AI. I don't think it's people sitting there policing
Right.
everything. This
Right.
AI that's
Yeah.
much more advanced than we're told. I
Right.
think a lot of that psyop that, oh, we just hit this. Nah, that was a long time ago. But
Right.
regardless, that's a totally different road. Let's continue
Yeah.
this. This is very important.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I read that quote there, Louis Brandeis around World War One.
Mhm.
To Abba Hillel Silver after World War II, Zionism has been defined as a form of American liberalism. This is how they created the dual loyalty. Should probably not say those things. Am I still here? Check, check, 1, 2.
Yep, still here.
You're still here.
So, and we'll
is
get into
huge.
this. So I'm just going to read because we do hit on all of this stuff as we go. So Balfour met with Brandeis on at least 2 occasions during his Washington visit. So Balfour, as soon as America announces its involvement in the war in early April, well, Balfour, the foreign minister of the British government, hops on a boat and comes over. He's here within 2 weeks. And so he wants to meet the American president and start to show them, let them in on a lot of the secret treaties from their imperial past. Because of their colonizing territories around the world, there's all kinds of secret pacts and all kinds of things that they had to, pass on to the Americans before they went to Paris. So that's why he comes. And so he actually searches out Brandeis, particularly. Balfour does. And so I say here, a large stack of contemporary scholarship concurs, as substantiated above by Ben Halpern, who's a professor of Near East Studies at Brandeis University itself, that these meetings between Brandeis and Balfour were critical and served as a major coming together of Anglo-American relations. Brandeis and Balfour were careful not to debate first rights to self-determination between the Jew and the Arab on numerical grounds, as the Hebrew then as now grossly outnumbered in the region by his fellow Arab Semite. This centuries-old tradition of calling anyone critical of Israel or Zionism anti-Semitic, a tired misnomer, in that there are over 70 languages associated on the Semitic branch. The largest spoken language, Arabic, Amharic, Tigrinya, and then Hebrew. So this is another trope that needs to go off and die, that we're being anti-Semitic when we're criticizing Israeli foreign policy or Jewish radicalism, right?
Aryans were Semitic. So that's how backwards and upside down and ignorant our concept of Semitic is.
Right.
The people that want to exterminate the Semitic people are Semitic. So
it's a weapon. It's ridiculous. Like you said,
they're all weapons.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're not going to let it go.
No.
I mean, especially with what's going on now, they need that weapon. Especially, I mean, we have the ability to see live in real time a genocide taking place.
Yes,
I mean,
that's
they're
exactly
literally bombing women and children in hospitals, and their religion calls for the killing of non-Jews. And they're using that term, U.S. politicians, because of this thing called dual loyalty.
Yeah, it's all made possible because of dual loyalty.
They're literally passing bills that will criminalize people for questioning Zionism, for questioning, criticizing very specific Jewish, and we've talked about this in the past on this show, criticizing very specific Jewish individuals, not a whole entire race of people, not a, I mean, yes, attacking a belief system, a religion that calls for, the eradication of all Gentiles, of all Goyim, right? And criticizing those things specifically.
Just to jump in, Andy, when you're talking about that specifically, you've told me in the past, and we haven't gone in too deep with it, and we may not be able to this episode, but you did say that that's beyond just the Talmud. That
Yes.
that's the general conception is, oh, it's the Talmud, which is
It's the
a way
Torah.
of,
It's the first five
right.
books of
That's
the
what you
Old
were saying,
Testament. Yeah,
which is
it's in
really
every
really
hotel
interesting.
room in the world, basically. It's in every
Right.
Western hotel room in the world. It's in every home in
Hmm.
the United States, in South America. There's over 4 billion people that call themselves Abrahamists, that call that religion, that faith, the truth, right? I
So
mean,
Right.
so you're talking, it's not real, but it almost becomes real because so many people believe it, like an egregore, right?
yeah,
So many people believe it. There's so many people that are basically self-fulfilling these prophecies,
Hmm.
and they're using spin and narrative to say, oh, prophecies being fulfilled when they return to the
yeah,
state of Israel, because it was in the book, right, that they would return to the land of
right.
Israel. So then that gains more power, and people gain, they gain more power that way. And literally, the whole book of Deuteronomy is totally eradicating all non-Jews.
Mhm.
Amalek, right? Amalek in the
Right.
Bible.
Amalek, and we know
Yeah.
Netanyahu has like
He's referenced that,
he's been
right?
referencing that
Yep.
recently. Yeah.
Yeah, in this
And
recent conflict. And then it's like people act like nothing existed before October 7th. Like there wasn't an issue before October 7th or something.
Yeah. Well, they're depending on the youth being the only ones watching these news channels too. That
Right.
that really don't remember anything
yeah,
unless their good parents taught them history, which is a lesser and
Mhm.
lesser reality for these youth.
Yeah.
Well, and even their parents, they'll tell you that Israel was started in 1948.
Right. Exactly.
Make fun of people that think it was October 7th. I've seen that meme out there. And so I've had to go on those threads and say it's 1917. It's been going on a long time.
And a lot of the older people too they're so heavily Christianized and
Yeah.
um
Evangelicalized.
yeah, exactly. So
Bingo.
they're like true to their faith, and they've, Dwayne, you've often used the Schofield Bible, right, as an example
Hmm.
of like you've called it a subversion, and
Yep.
to some degree it is, but I've heard I've heard it put in on a bigger picture in a way that makes more sense to me, that Christianity hasn't been subverted. Christianity is the subversion.
Right. Yep.
They're that,
Sure.
like, Christians and Jews are literally just two Jewish sects arguing over who the Messiah is,
Right.
Everything is, man. The more I got into that,
right?
the Lawrence Gardner work that I was telling you guys about. I was even going to send Dwayne a book when I was finished reading it, and
Right.
now I'm like, maybe. I mean, because not only do I find out that Lawrence was like all of his writings were basically sanctioned and approved by the royal family to be
Mm.
part of their House of Windsor esteemed, you know, antiquaries group or whatever. And he's knighted and all that. So it's like
Right.
it was all connected. And then I started to find out like, all right, it's just more praise for this messianic line.
Yeah.
It's just, Lawrence Gardner basically says it wasn't Jesus that made it important. It was this bloodline that goes way,
Right.
way back. And it's
Yeah.
like, what's interesting is that from my other studies, I am finding that, yes, these lines do go way, 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 way back. Absolutely. Back beyond what we're talking about. But it's twinged and sold to us in many different flavors, all being controlled narratives
Yeah.
from alternative media sources all the way through to the mainstream and academics. So
Yeah. And so going back to what Gerard said about the use of anti-Semitic as a weapon, and that's
mhm.
most certainly what they've been doing, and it's been going on for a long time, for well over 100 years. But I will say this about that: it is certainly a thinly veiled sort of attack, isn't it? I mean, it doesn't take much research to find out that it's sort of a faulty idea to use that word in the context that they are using it. You know,
Right.
that it's a, you know, it's not accurate. First of all, it's not an accurate definition of what anti-Semitic means. And if we were all to collectively sort of understand that, they would lose that ability to, weaponize guilt,
Right.
whatever it is that they're trying to do there.
Hmm.
Just like if we know logical fallacy, they can't really fool us anymore because we understand the names and the methods and the ways that they try to lie and the
Right.
different types of lies that there are. Once we're sort of up to speed on all of that, you can't actually fool us anymore. And so it's the same thing with this. So we need to understand that, it's a faulty idea. It's a And if we know that, we can just step right past it when somebody calls us an anti-Semite, right?
Hmm.
Because there's 70 other Semitic languages on that branch.
Oh, it's unreal. Yeah. And yeah, what we're finding more and more is that these branches
Them
go
using
back
that
to a
denies the
singular
existence
root.
of everybody else. You understand me?
Sorry,
You know what I
buddy.
mean?
I think
Oh,
you got cut off for a second, and
yeah, right.
we only heard the ending of that.
Yeah, so I'll just keep going.
Sorry. Hell yeah, man. That seems to work best.
So,
So we got to the end of these branches.
yeah, Brandeis is also one of the earliest to actively promote dual loyalty between Israel and the United States through a shared nationalism.
Mm,
And was very influential on Balfour, wielding all the authority vested within him. Brandeis is an essential figure in the conception, promotion, and especially the consummation of the document most responsible for securing a final homeland for the Jew, the Balfour Declaration. So there's the letter to Warburg where he's stepping down from all his Zionist affairs.
hmm.
That's a picture of Balfour there. And so by the time Brandeis was confirmed U.S. Supreme Court Justice in the spring of 1916, he had been the leader of the American Zionist movement for 2 years already. He was a longtime intimate advisor to U.S. President Woodrow Wilson. As you would expect, Brandeis's words carried much weight in many circles. Brandeis inside a three-circle Venn diagram uniquely positioned to press for a Jewish homeland. And I talked about that earlier, just how he had the president in the palm of his hand, just as
Yeah.
he had American Jewry. So here he states that it is social justice which Zionism represents, and every bit of that is the American ideals of the 20th century. So he's the father of progressivism, and that's what he's talking about. The American ideals of the 20th century means, Herbert Crowley wrote The Promise of American Life in 1910, and it inspired the entire progressive movement and the Bull Moose Party and all of this. And so that's what he's saying. And they're using social justice to get themselves a Jewish homeland in just the same way as they're pushing their progressive um, reform measures through America.
It's really interesting. I just thought I wasn't paying attention for a very long period of time in my life, and then suddenly came to know this term social justice. But it's like
Right.
this term social justice was has only really been popular, I can remember, for the last like 8 to 10, maybe 15 years. Am I wrong here? Like in a popular American way, like hearing the
Yeah.
term social justice warrior, like
Yeah.
you'd hear social justice
Yeah.
probably in a very academic way, but not in a very on everybody's fucking tongue all the time.
Yeah.
Like it became a popular thing probably in a very strategic point in time in the 20th century, in the 21st century as
Well,
well,
it was
harkening back
used,
to all this.
but this is really, the inspiration of the French revolutions and all of
Right,
that.
right.
So,
Social justice.
yes, this is what
It
it's
just
all
keeps
about:
coming
social
up in
equity.
strategic times.
Yeah. And so we
Such a
hear it
revealing
today.
quote.
This is, that's a great point too, because we want to relate our work to today because it's
Right.
relevant. And so people can make connections a little bit easier when they understand what it looks like today. And
Yeah, I didn't
exactly.
hear about social justice warriors or social justice at all. We didn't have that term when I was in high school in the early,
Right.
2000s, late 90s. I didn't
And
have
Me.
that
Facebook
term.
Facebook IPO'd what the same day that what was it
LifeLog.
LifeLog
LifeLog
the
went
same
down.
exact day,
Same
but that
exact
was
day.
Yeah.
2004.
Right,
So
yeah.
I would say
It's just
sort
weird
of
this.
not long after that, probably, Andy,
That it
because
was
this is when a lot of
popularized.
these problems that we're seeing
Mhm.
have sort of come about, these new problems that we've never thought about or
Okay.
considered before.
Right. So it's just so amazing and so revealing to see this quote in 2000 or 1916 that social
Yes,
justice, which
exactly.
Zionism
Yes,
represents. It's like, okay, so you got to fast forward, and
yes.
like all these Zoomers and millennials need to like see this quote and go, oh, this term, social justice, that has popped up in our adult lives. You
What it
know,
is,
it's interesting.
it's going through the sentimental door of liberalism. They are pulling at our heartstrings, right? The same as they are today. And this allows them to move history forward in a dialectic form, problem, reaction, solution. So the Industrial Revolution created the problem, and the reform was going to be the answer. And we are living in the synthesis of it today, 100 years later. And, a lot of these guys say that there was no way that they could tell whether what they had done was going to be beneficial or not because they were too close to the events. But now we have 100 years. And so I've staken my claim to all of this history and saying we've got 100 years of hindsight. We understand the philosophies and the ideologies and the ideals that were moving people. And I think that, we can be both the witness to and the final judgment on the decisions made 100 years ago, because we are the children of the future. We are the people that they were making these decisions for. So we can very easily look around and see
Oh
a
yeah.
debt clock in New York that doesn't stop, and it's in the trillions, and it doesn't look like it's ever going to end. And so we can start to look at the things like the Federal Reserve Board and the Federal Trade Commission and see how they've just grown into this giant monolithic surveillance mechanism, right? And well beyond its original intent and spirit. So, these are actually very easy things that we can point to now. And so instead of wanting to crash all of capitalism or the entire system, we know now the institutions and organizations that should be removed, and we can do it surgically, because social science in general should, in my opinion, should be removed, because it is really the source of all of this investigation on the human being. And it's really led to a lot of it led to the technocracy and now to AI singularity. This is where it all comes from. So we can, a lot of times I say that we should go back to about 1911, 1910 and rethink all of this. But in classic progressive form, there's no time to ask questions. So you can see that they've
Just
been
keep
able to
moving
push it
forward.
through for 100 years. And it's the same thing with climate change. It used to be called global warming, but now it's crazy that we call it climate change. Climate crisis, now it's moved on to.
The word climate actually means changing.
Right.
Right.
So you have
And so,
like change, like changing,
right.
like
And then you
basically
talk,
is it's the most ridiculous thing ever.
right. And you talk about another
Yep.
misnomer, another faulty idea. That's it. When they call us climate deniers for doubting that the government, by taking more of our tax money, is going to solve, what it is that they're calling a climate crisis. I mean, it's
Right.
ridiculous. And it, it's very symbolic, and it's analogous. It's, relevant, and it shows that they push these narratives and they get people to believe crazy things. And, I remember when I first woke up from that many years ago about climate change, and it took me a while to consider it even. I thought that people that were thinking it was just a government hoax were crazy. But you go look into it and you can see that the motivations are there. You look into the Club of Rome and where it all the entire idea comes from. And it's all just to create hive mind. It's trying to create a collective state of fear, in much the same way that I think they're trying to push the UFO and alien agenda today. It's just a giant collective fear mechanism. So,
Yeah, absolutely. 1,000%, man. I agree. And that's stuff I cover on this channel quite often, because it may seem like woo woo, but it's very intentionally that way. It's
Look at how well it worked for COVID. I mean, just
yeah.
scaring people into literally like not going and saying goodbye to the people they love in the hospital. You know what
What's
I mean?
crazy
Like
about
literally people like isolated themselves and then died anyways, you
Yeah.
know, like alone. And
Yep.
I mean, that's what fear does to people.
Eating
It
fast
just
food.
completely broke people's brains. I mean,
Mm,
it,
and what's
it bro-
interesting
yeah.
What's interesting about that is that like the difference between that group that was so eager to oblige and the UFO group is that the UFO group thinks that they're awake. And the, you know what I mean? The the
Yeah.
government, yeah, we caught them too many times, and now they're coming out with it. Like,
Right,
yeah, that's
right.
what's going on. You know,
Sure,
it's
sure.
fucking hilarious. Like
So
the idea that it's been suppressed, everything is intentional, and we're showing that right now. Like all this information that Dwayne is bringing forward, every time you've been on my show, it's showing. It's like watching a movie backwards, seeing the ending and going, "Oh my god, how did this
yeah,
happen?" And
yeah,
then
that's a great
get to
analogy.
see in the beginning, you're like, okay, this makes perfect sense. How
Yeah,
this insane ending happens
yeah,
that made it now it makes perfect sense.
yeah, it
All
does.
right,
It really
go
locks
ahead.
everything together. It answers a lot of questions. And so I
Yeah.
want to take this moment because we're talking about fear, and we are seeing even conspiracy theorists, the conspiracy world, alternative media, even programs like TLAV or No More News, all of these, they're still creating fear by what they cover. If you're paying attention, you'll see that they're no real different than the mainstream in that they're trying to make people fearful of the future. And through my research, I've started to see that this pattern, whether real or not, really, forbids people, prevents people from looking into things. So whether you're a conspiracy theorist fearing government tyranny, or you're a Christian evangelical fearing the tribulation, you know, it's all fear of the future based. And so in conjunction with that, they want our attention. So as long as you're paying attention to the wrong things, you're going to be in fear. So it's now easier for you through symptoms, from evaluating your own symptoms, whether or not you are spending the your time in the right place. Because if you're filled with fear or anxiety, you are by definition fearful of the future. And
Yeah.
so I don't think that you're ever going to be in a good, productive place in your mind if you're always fearful of the future. You have to, and this is why we've separated ourselves nearly entirely from the mainstream media, because we know that as long as we're paying attention to them, they've got us. You're hooked. And you can say that I'm just watching it to see what's going on and to watch their next moves, but that's just an excuse for your addiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you're paying attention, you're hooked. It's not about your ability to consider information there. If your eyeballs are on that TV, they got you and then they got us. So if you're really serious about winning, you want to pay attention to what you're paying attention to, And so this is a real internal, you talk about go within to get out, Gerard. This is it, right? You want to look in to see your own activities, step out of your body. And this is about growing up and waking up, is to see your own responsibility and how you are contributing to it. And that is one major way, is where we pay our attention, because
Hell yeah.
attention is the new data, which was the new oil, remember? But it's as long as you're paying attention, they got you and they got us. So I'm really this, I might be biased and this comes across a little bit funny, but it's like the only place you really should be paying attention to is bulletproofpub.com or the deep share, or go within to get out, when we're talking about these things. And I'm not saying that because we're involved in it. I'm saying that on the power of this information. I just remove myself from this and ask the viewer and the listener, how important and how pertinent is this information today, to understand that a U.S. Supreme Court justice was the primary architect of Israel, right? This really helps you understand what's going on there today and to make right decisions when confronted with it. So you're not donating to Israel, you're staying out of this argument. And if you want to be on the right side of history. You're protesting all of this Israeli foreign policy.
Yeah, donate to us instead.
Yeah, right.
Go check out Andy's page. Go check out mine. Go check out Dwayne's. Go check out Chris Yannick from Rantcast, who helped us out with that February 4th, 2004 date. Go check out Mario at Symbolic Studies. Thanks for being here, man. Mario just said future shock, and it's exactly that, man. It's like just an inability to process the future. And it's funny too, because I see that a lot in like people I've known that grew up in like crazy evangelical Christian families that were basically told you better follow all of this perfectly or you're going to burn in hell forever and the end is coming and everyone you love and you meet out in the world is going to be taken from you. Like I know someone who I've loved very much who grew up like that. And
well, who grew up like that?
Future shock that does to a person is awful,
Yeah. Well, Woodrow Wilson was a evangelical Presbyterian, and his father broke the Presbyterian Church into a North and South. His dad did. He was a significant figure, and Presbyterianism is a underlying, under talked about aspect to all of this. Is that a lot of Presbyterians are here, and so Presbyterianism isn't all that removed from evangelicalism, right?
Right. It's really not.
The two kind of go hand in hand. So officially, the Balfour mission was to promote wartime cooperation, but Balfour's visit was primarily financial, and we've learned that through our research of the Paris Peace Conference. The true intentions of Balfour and the rest of his entourage, including the governor of the Bank of England, Walter Cunliffe, was to bring the Americans up to speed on the lucrative past of British imperialism. With the United States now a committed belligerent in the Great War, previous treaties and agreements made by the French and British in Italy, Africa, the Near East, and other areas around the world had to be laid on the table. And it is in this light we see the depths to Brandeis' influence. So there's Chaim Weizmann. I didn't put his name there, but that's what Chaim Weizmann looks like, everybody. He's the one that's kissing Brandeis' hand at the end of this story. So there's a poster, an actual poster from back in the day. And these are probably funded by Rothschild or one of these earlier groups that we were talking about. It's propaganda, right?
Yeah.
So Brandeis, the eminent insider, while Chaim Weizmann was very much considered the outsider to Wilson's circle, where Weizmann struggled to get access even by repeated cable. Brandeis arrived as an invited and eminent guest, the sage advisor to all, is what they called him. Where Weizmann, because of his personality, hit serious diplomatic roadblocks, the people's attorney smoothed political and personal tensions. So he brought people together, while Weizmann was kind of being a little bit radical, a little desperate. So clearly it is because of Brandeis' influence on the American Zionist movement and American Jewry in general, groups whose blessings Weizmann desperately needed, that Brandeis became an integral figure. Quote, the sage advisor to all. That's what Frankfurter called him, even more so than Weizmann in the final drafting of the Declaration. So Brandeis' personal influence was doubly important, for he combined the roles of a Jewish leader and a close advisor of President Wilson. When Balfour came to the United States to consult his new allies shortly after America entered the war, the new British foreign minister made a point of meeting Brandeis. All contemporaries agree in regarding these meetings as being critical in opening up the last phase of the negotiations for a British pro-Zionist policy declaration. So that was the conclusion made, was a British mandate to help support the Jewish homeland. And so that is from page 71, Brandeis and the Origins of the Balfour Declaration, Ben Halpern. So he's the professor we mentioned earlier from Brandeis University itself. So, they're pretty close to primary source material. It's not still secondary, but, we're talking about a professional expert in, Jewish history from Brandeis University itself, stating things that we are too. So this is kind of what makes us bulletproof, right?
And is in the context that he wrote it, was it even slanderous? He was just stating facts of the matter at the time? Or was it in the same context as we're kind of seeing it now?
He isn't laying all the blame at the feet of Brandeis, because he is sort of centric. He's thinking of Zionism and the origins of the Balfour Declaration. He's not understanding scientific management, that he was in there affecting the Taylor Society. He doesn't understand that he's affecting the evangelical Christians through William Eugene Blackstone. You know,
So he's
this
got
is
one
really the
piece of
first.
the puzzle, but
Yeah, it's like compartmentalized, just like the inquiry were in Paris. They only knew what they were doing, and it was only when all of those parts came together that they saw the League of Nations and the Treaty of Versailles for what it was, and there was uproar. But up until then,
right.
they didn't know. Same thing here.
This is unreal.
So Weitzman launched a series of urgent pleas to his American contacts and to Brandeis in particular for their aid in a situation in which the future prospects of Zionism were critically involved. Weitzman pinned his hopes on Louis Brandeis as the person most capable of influencing President Wilson. And now that's documented historical fact that that's true.
Wow.
He's the closest personal advisor. And so this is what I say about Colonel Edward Mandell House, is that he's just a front too. And so we see people like Richard Grove at the Tragedy and Hope community and other historians always pointing to the Anglo-American establishment and Carroll Quigley and all of these things. But we're showing that there's a deeper involvement than just Colonel Edward House. Now, one of the first times I ever was on Tragedy and Hope community over a decade ago, they mentioned Colonel Edward Mandell House, and they're still talking about him. They will not go past him. They're not talking Brandeis and the Progressive Fathers. Now, either they have a giant rain shadow and they're ignorant of it, or they're, purposely ignoring it. That's the only two options you have now, because I've confronted them. And so when somebody doesn't see the importance in this, they're either blind or, not wanting to see.
Well, again, we go back to that Woodrow Wilson quote from 1919 that, like, I am a most unhappy man.
Mm-hmm.
I have unwittingly ruined my country.
Yeah. And there's another famous quote in The New Freedom about that too, a book of which actually Wilson says in the first sentence of the introduction that he didn't write. So then you wonder who is writing all of this stuff. And we know Brandeis was a major speechwriter. He was probably the primary Wilson speechwriter. I mean, he's the architect of the presidential campaign, his whole New Freedom.
Exactly. Or he'd have someone else do it, because that's the way these people are. Just like these social sciences and the social studies that have been carried out, the study of the human being, we've done it to ourselves because we've been taking sociology classes for decades and decades, in high schools and middle schools and things like that. We've been doing it to ourselves.
Yeah. We just don't recognize it because we're not told. So when Balfour came to the United States to consult his new allies shortly after America entered the war, the new British foreign minister made a point of meeting Brandeis. All contemporaries agree in regarding these meetings as being critical in opening up the last phase of negotiations for a British pro-Zionist policy declaration. I think I just read that.
It's okay.
There's multiple sources. We're substantiating all over the place to the point where it's just documented history. We really don't. We don't feel the need for sourcing it, other than the world just doesn't know it.
Right.
So we have to source it.
Yeah, exactly. This is so important. I've never heard most of these quotes until talking to you guys,
Yeah. Well, we've gone deep into the books. We've gone deep into their own literature, their communications. And I think that's probably what's been lacking, somebody with an intent to go in and find out what's really going on.
Right.
So, they refer to all of this as someday in the future, a historian is going to come along and find this a unique opportunity. And here I am, and I'm staking claim to it 100 years later. So, because we have the hindsight. This is why I'll keep repeating it. Hindsight is 2020, and it allows us to really contemplate and consider and conclude. So, Balfour met with Brandeis on at least 2 occasions during his Washington visit. And I got the 7th and the 11th, but I've seen where they said the 10th too. But we all agree that there's 2 meetings at least. And a large stack of contemporary scholarship concurs, as substantiated above by Ben Halpern, professor of Near East Studies at Brandeis. I'll say these things over and over, that these meetings between Brandeis and Balfour were critical and served as a major coming together of the Anglo-American relations. Not just Anglo-American, but obviously, going to create Israel.
Right.
And you can see the deeper you go that the war was actually created or, facilitated a lot of this change. Without the war, I'm not sure we could have a progressive movement. So how intent were they on creating the war to begin with? So
I'd say pretty intent.
yeah, they were creating that on purpose and fomenting, the British first, the British public into declaring war on Germany, and then finally the Americans. This is where the quid pro quo is, the famous, I'll trade you this for that.
That was the bayoneting babies propaganda, right? It sounds a lot like what we were hearing recently with the beheaded babies coming out of Israel.
Right. Is that what they're saying? See, if we knew the propaganda, we'd laugh at that.
And that was like debunked within like moments.
Right.
But I mean, that was World War I, right? The bayoneting the babies, the Germans, the big bad Germans, and then that never went away.
Well,
until they completely obliterated the German reputation after World War II.
So, and so there's a Beast of Berlin, right?
Yeah, right.
In World War I and World War II.
Right.
Just like there's a Beast of Baghdad under Bush in the late 80s.
There you go.
And what were they doing but bayoneting babies, and all kinds of horrific claims were being made. And we've seen now, this isn't just our opinion, we've gone into the actual reports that inspired war. And they're saying the same thing, that, a lot of this is propaganda. And historians today are like, no, that is not a trustworthy document. But this is what the First World War was started on, the Bryce report. And it's all bullshit. It's all just total propaganda. Today, it's admitted that that's the case. But, nobody knows these things. The headlines stay, and people believe that wars happen for totally fictitious reasons.
Right.
So here's another important point, that Brandeis and Balfour were careful not to debate first rights to self-determination between the Jew and the Arab on numerical grounds, because, the Jew is greatly outnumbered there. So they had to look at it in a different way, because everybody wanted self-determination in Paris, 1919. That's what the whole thing was about. So dual loyalty between the U.S. and Jewish homeland was very influential on Balfour, wielding all the authority vested within him. Brandeis, an essential figure. I've already read that too. So Balfour and Louis Brandeis, a Supreme Court justice and the leading American Zionist, came up with an ingenious solution. It was wrong to use mere numerical self-determination. A great many potential inhabitants of the Jewish home in Palestine still lived outside its borders. And Zionism, said Balfour, be it right or wrong, good or bad, is rooted in age-long traditions, in present needs, in future hopes of far profounder import than the desires and prejudices of the 700,000 Arabs at the time who now inhabit that ancient land. That's Balfour saying that. They're avoiding the argument about being outnumbered there. And that's really what's helped the whole anti-Semitic trope to live a long life.
Right.
So the many drafts of the Balfour Declaration were made in London and passed back and forth between the British and American War Office channels, and Brandeis was central to its draft. And we've got documents here showing that, and so this is from the British foreign policy papers from their archives, that the draft, cabled from government to government, was handed to the Brandeis regime for its approval. After a most necessary revision, President Wilson, acting through Colonel House, who was in full sympathy with the Zionist aims, authorized cabling to the British government the version that was published of the Balfour Declaration, and to which all the Allied governments in turn gave their approval. So that is showing that Brandeis, it wasn't going to go forward without approval from the Brandeis group. Okay, so
this
there's
all proving to be so,
Yep. So there's our sources, a list of our sources. You can go look at those. But yep, I've been saying now for a month that it's a U.S. Supreme Court justice that created Israel. And, you know, if you want to know how this looks today, I would say that Andy Gerard, this is probably a good time to share that diagram that you had earlier today about, you know, where dual loyalty has gotten us, this idea of dual loyalty.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now.
And how that has enabled, like you said earlier, a genocide, because I really do believe that that's what is going on. And so what is that that first idea of dual loyalty, what has that led to? We're talking about 100 years and how hindsight's important, and it can be 2020. Well, there you go.
So you see the screen?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, just a few of the positions here. Some in the audience will be very familiar. Some might not be familiar at all. You're talking the biggest banker of the land, Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, dual citizen with Israel and the U.S., Attorney General, biggest lawyer in the land, Merrick Garland.
If I can interrupt for 1 second, this is a large part of the administrative state that Brandeis built.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. He set the groundwork and the foundation for this to be okay.
Yep.
And I mean, you guys might have seen that meme going around recently, but you have a Secretary of State there. So you have the number one diplomat in the U.S., a dual citizen, making his tour, making his rounds, trying to run cover for what Israel's doing right now to the Palestinians. And he went and said that we can strategically fight two wars, one in the Ukraine and one in Israel, if it goes that way. And then the biggest banker in the land, also a dual citizen with the U.S. and Israel, Janet Yellen, says, we can afford it.
Right.
So we have the number one diplomat. We have the number one diplomat saying that we can, like, strategically and like, you know, from a power perspective, fight these wars, these two different wars. And then she says we can afford it.
Now, you know what I want to say there too, Andy, is that this idea of two wars at the same time, this comes straight out of PNAC, the Project for New American Century, because you think about, you know, geopolitical warfare, to take care of all of the superpowers, you'd have to have a pretty big military. And this is one of the things that they considered about the Project for a New American Century, is that they had to build a military big enough to fight two wars at the same time. So you can see that this was the idea. And when you look at the origins of PNAC, you go back to that famous quote from whoever it was, I can't remember his name, where he's saying that they're going to go after 7 countries in 5 years.
Richard Clark or something like that. General Clark.
The famous quote where they're
Syria,
talking about
Libya,
right after 9/11.
Yeah.
And what have they done? So here again is a great example of hindsight. 2020, man.
That. I mean, then you got right here, Office of Science and Technology Policy. So you got science and tech, Jewish, dual citizen, Secretary of State for Political Affairs, Deputy Secretary of State, Secretary of Homeland Security, Director of National Intelligence, Director of the CIA, dual citizen.
I did not know this.
I mean, this is a small list. The list I sent you earlier is way bigger, but I can't get it to focus. So
there's a great video going around too of a guy like going into like public state houses and things like that and reading off lists like this with the dual citizenship, and it's pretty impressive. And everyone, of course, they just roll their eyes.
There's a video recently that just came out of Mayorkas, so Secretary of Homeland Security. They're grilling him about his border policies. And you know what he said? He said, I'm the child of a Holocaust survivor.
He basically teared up. It was ridiculous.
You can find the clip.
I don't even know if I want to justify it by putting his face on my podcast, other than where it is right here on the left. But like, he teared up. He basically teared up like an actor would, and it was just absolutely disgusting watching him do it. He knew exactly what he was doing, and I feel as though watching the other guy that was, you know, attacking him, the look on his face was like, I can't say shit. I absolutely can't fight him on this because of what I'll look like to half the people in the
Right.
room. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, what power to be able to just pull that card and
And how did they get
shut
this far?
down.
dealership.
just shut down a conversation. I mean, these are people that hold public office, right?
Yeah.
We didn't appoint them, we didn't elect them. I don't vote anyways because it's insane.
Yeah.
But I mean,
we're part of the problem, Andy. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I can't complain. I have no right to complain because I didn't vote. I always, that really makes me like giggle now because I'm like, wait a minute, you voted for this. You can't complain.
Yes,
exactly.
exactly.
You
It's so
voted.
inverted. It's so inverted.
You said that, like,
You
said that
complied.
Tyrants rule you then.
Yeah.
You said the government could come to my house and steal over 50% of my income. You said that. I
You
didn't say
empowered
that.
Basically,
that.
it's like someone showed up at your house and went, "Oh my God, you got to buy volcano insurance," and we're like, "We don't have volcanoes around here." Like, dude, you gotta get it. And then like everybody else buys it. They're like, "Dude, why didn't you buy your volcano insurance?" Like, I just want to opt out of this whole situation.
Yeah.
Like, what are you guys talking
And-
about?
And what is insurance but speculation?
Right,
It's
exactly.
another key aspect. So, and who enables them but the voter too, right?
Bingo.
Who
Keep the
complies,
machine going.
allows it by
They keep
voting?
You allow this to continue, and there's
Yeah,
no
it's
other
another
way
fault.
around that.
It's another faulty trope.
Yeah.
So
Look at that comment section. We got a lot of
hey,
people.
right on.
Still got
Everybody's
18. Still got 18 people
Nice.
watching.
hell yeah! Thank you so
Appreciate
much for
that.
everybody checking this out and being here. If you're here for the first time or the third time, thank you so much, or the 150th time.
What is the
coming
chat?
in.
What do people in the chat think about this? I mean, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah,
PNAC.
folks.
Somebody's talking about PNAC there.
Yeah,
PNAC
rebuilding
written by an
America's
Israeli
defenses,
government
right?
official. Yeah, See Truth, dude. See Truth is dropping some bombs. Thank you, See Truth. PNAC written by an Israeli government official and carried out on 9/11.
Yeah, there's two of them. Well, there's like 18 signatories, but yeah, the two lead ones. Yep.
And,
Yeah,
and
so
most of
saying-
those representatives in PNAC were Jewish, right?
Yep.
And then
Yep.
they
Yep.
went on. They were part of Bush's cabinet, right?
Yep.
And they were appointed during his presidency. So
Mhm.
that reminds me, I will pull up this quote one more time. I just resent it to you guys for people in the chat since we're live.
Mhm.
This quote right here from Marcus Eli Ravage. He wait, am I sharing my
yeah.
screen? Am I sharing my screen still?
I think so. Yeah, there it is. Yep,
okay.
I see
Ravage.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
Century
so
Brutal.
So
This is
Century
a brutal
Magazine.
quote.
Century
Magazine.
Magazine. This guy
That's official.
this guy was a Rothschild biographer. Okay, so he knew a few things about how this group worked. Right, he was very intimate.
Yep.
He writes
Yep.
this little pamphlet in Century Magazine called "A Real Case Against the Jews" is what it was called.
Yeah.
And of course, just like the protocols, right? This gets dismissed as complete satire. It was complete
Right.
satire.
I remember that. I
Right.
Because
remember
he's
that,
anti-Semitic. He's just
He-
anti-Semitic. Poof.
Yeah. Well,
Magic dust.
he was a
That's
proud
right.
Jew. This guy was a proud Jew, right? So, but he like completely, I mean, it gets
That's the
completely
thing.
written off as satire. But look at this quote. Look
Yeah.
at this quote. I mean, if this doesn't say a lot, I mean, this really hits hard with some of the things that we've been talking about. A lot of the names and things that Dwayne has just, thoroughly documented. And what we just showed you as a cursory look into the Biden administration, which this has gone on for, since the beginning, right?
Build back better.
Exactly. Look at this
Progressive.
quote. We
Yeah,
are
Andy, please read it.
intruders. We are subverters. We have taken your natural world, your
Natural.
ideals, your destiny, and played havoc with them. We have been at the bottom of not only the latest great war, but of every other major revolution in your history. We have brought discord
Great
and
Depressions,
confusion.
too.
Yeah. We have brought discord and confusion and frustration into your personal and public life. We are still doing it. No one can tell how long we shall go on doing it. Who knows what great and glorious destiny might have been yours if we had left you alone.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I mean, that right there, that's just a little snippet. That whole pamphlet, I suggest you go read that, because it's like, it's more of that. He gets into Christianity, how like they created
How they're using,
Christianity,
right,
right, quote
Right.
unquote.
right. Yep,
The
sure.
thing is like,
Christianity is a Jewish creation to theologically control the Gentiles. It was
Yep.
written in Greek, the Septuagint. It was targeted to the Greeks. They were being, completely subdued in Israel by the Romans, and they couldn't take them over militarily, so they needed the idea of a suffering Messiah, not a military Messiah, but a suffering Messiah, and that theologically conquered the Romans. And look what the religion ended up becoming.
Yeah.
It makes so much more sense. Like, they
Are
worship
you-
a Jew. Jesus was Jewish. He's a rabbi.
right.
He was circumcised. He went to
Right.
synagogue. He kept the Sabbath. I mean, he's Jewish. Doesn't get much more Jewish than that.
Yeah.
It doesn't get much
Yeah.
more Jewish
Yeah.
than that.
No, no.
like whether he was real or not, too. That's not even the
I
point.
did. I mean,
You're
40
right, you
years
know?
after is like the best evidence you got. Like,
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 Again, it's secular and religious.
and right, we've talked
perspectives.
about this, and we can wrap it up if you guys want, but we talked
I got
about
a
this
couple things to say.
before, Dwayne.
Mhm.
How subversive is it? I mean, literally, the Christian doctrine says, hate your brother, hate your father, hate your own life, sell all your possessions, love your enemy, turn the other cheek, render to Caesar what is Caesar's. That is a subversive, very subversive and convenient theology if you want to dominate and reign over a group of individuals. Hate your life, hate your mother, hate your father, love your enemy, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, obey authority, obey the government. That's what the doctrine is.
Also, allow me to kind of step it out again a few rungs on the perspective, and focus on everything but yourself. And the hate your life thing, hate your life thing, like, look forward to the one afterwards. Now think about how prominent, like, maybe we call it atheism. It's just like non-Western religious belief in afterlife, basically, is what these people have. And it's like, when you put that into context, it's like they, being more atheistic than anything else, are the source of all the mythology and the, talk about subversion. They own the fear of death. They completely own the fear of death, and and this is even what I told you guys about Bach Saga claims, that this was when the first religion happened, was when the Torah was written. And that might just be a coincidence, but it just so happens that that's what they're talking about when these Western religions popped up in the way that they are, and mythology was created in this way. This is a very similar situation to what happened with the Carolingian dynasty, where suddenly our folklore became a thing in basically a metaphoric way of talking about old parts of history that have been erased. Very interesting points from all over this. I know I'm kind of jumping, but it's
a beautiful point.
It's just a constant theme that we see over and over again.
Denial
I'm just finding
of history.
so many different connections to it too. Like, I could just go on.
Well, it's a denial of history, and history is important because if we learn from it, we'll no longer be condemned to repeat it.
We've also been convinced that it was nonsense to believe it was history, especially when it comes to like mythology and things like that. To see it all as silly stories by primitive people, or it's been completely subverted and inverted.
And that's even gone on with legitimate historians too. Like, even in the field that I'm in, people will consider this kind of well, how do you trust this history? Because history is told by the victors and all of that. But it's this information we're showing you exactly how. Like, Charles Homer Haskins, the head of one of the directors in the inquiry was the head of all curriculum to do with how history is taught in all secondary schools.
Mm-hmm.
And he's writing reports on exactly what we should be teaching kids. So he's, he's creating the memory hole. 1984 talks about the memory hole. And
Yeah.
so we've actually uncovered how they literally did it.
This is
So
unreal.
I should probably say this too before we go to do with dual loyalty.
Mm.
And so the night before Brandeis gets elected to the provisional executive committee of General Zionist Affairs, the night before he's elected to the head of international Zionism, he takes a boat ride to Chicago. I think it's where it is. No, he wouldn't be taking a boat ride to Chicago. I think it was New York. Anyways, the night before he takes this boat ride. Yeah, he's coming from Boston to New York. That's what it is. And one of his closest confidants, Horace W. Kalin, is with him. And this is the moment where Brandeis switches from speaking derogatorily about hyphenated Americans, those people that have come over to America but are still holding on to their traditions from Europe. He spoke derogatorily of those people, saying that you should assimilate up until 1914. And this night before, and Horace W. Kalin is really the founding father of dual loyalty. It's him that comes up with the idea. And he suggests to Brandeis on this boat trip the night before that he should embrace this idea of dual loyalty. And it's actually necessary. He has to have the idea of dual loyalty, because it's going to then allow Americans and American Jews to feel like it's okay to support Israel. Whereas, the belief up until then was assimilate. Even my family, when they came in the 40s, it was about assimilating and learning English and learning the traditions of Western world. And so this Horace Kalin, he's also at Harvard. Okay, and Brandeis went to Harvard Law School. He had the highest grade point average or score or whatever for 80 years there at Harvard Law School. And this is where he met Kalin. And together they form the Parashim out of the Menorah Society. Now, those are two Zionist secret societies. And so that's the two founders of those, primarily Kalin, but also Brandeis. And we've got provenance of all types showing lectures that they were taking, speeches and pamphlets and things that Brandeis was writing at these Menorah Society meetings and at the Parashim meetings. So they created this Zionist secret society that I've seen some imply that it was like a guerrilla unit. Now, that's interesting to me, because they're going over to colonize, and you'd think that if you're going to go into a bee's nest like that, being who they were, that they were going to expect some sort of resistance. And so there's no way that they didn't think about agriculture and water and all of these things without thinking about protecting themselves. And this is why the British Mandate existed. And so this is where our research is going to go now. Just how influential is Brandeis? Is he like Cecil Rhodes in directing armies in this movement too? Because that's what Cecil Rhodes did in Africa. This is what the scramble for Africa was. This is what the Boer War was about. They were fighting over, colonial possessions. And so I'm wondering now if Brandeis and Rothschild and these guys actually were ahead of some sort of guerrilla outfit that was, providing muscle for them too. Yeah. So there they are.
You mentioned Parish.
Coming straight out of Harvard.
Right there. I actually had a video queued
Pharisees.
up.
Yep.
There it is right there. Parashim, Jewish disciples of the Vilna Gaon. And the Vilna Gaon was this Elijah ben Solomon Zalman, Lithuanian Jew who left Lithuania at the beginning of the 19th century to settle in the land of Israel. So like the idea of Zionism happened well before this too. Like they started settling in Israel. Some of these like more extreme Orthodox Kabbalistic Jews started settling in Israel, like in the early 1800s. So like that's one of the things where it's like it's not just political Zionism; it's also these religious Zionists, these Kabbalists that were like working towards this for like a long time before
Yep.
sort of these manifestations of political Zionism kind of came about in the late 1800s. But I was telling Andy when you cut earlier, we were just kind of discussing some of the anti-Zionist Jews that are getting all this credit in the media, even in the alternative media. They get all this credit for resisting Zionism, but when you actually go and learn what they believe, like these anti-Zionists, they're very orthodox. A lot of them are Kabbalistic. Um, they are way more intense in their beliefs of non-Jews, and they're way more
Fundamental.
messianic and fundamental than even the rabid Zionists.
Right.
They actually want these anti-Zionist Jews. They actually want the world to turn against Israel because it's part of prophecy. They want the whole world to turn against Israel, basically destroy almost like the entirety of the modern state of Israel. This is what the Orthodox, super Orthodox Kabbalistic Jews want. They want the entire world to turn on Israel. So that's where you see this outward pride of resisting Zionism, right? Yep. And then basically they want all of us, non-Jews, and even the Jews in Israel to be killed, and they will then usher in the Messianic age and basically rule over the ashes. Like this is their belief system. I have receipts to like back this up. You know what I'm saying? So something maybe
your big claim is that it's like it's not just the Talmud, as I said before, like because that's what everybody
the
always...
Kabbalah, the Torah. It's you know.
What about the Zohar? Have you looked into the Zohar?
It's the Zohar. So the Zohar and the Kabbalah are basically like that's this Kabbalistic thought, and that's where like a lot of this stuff comes from.
Like it's interesting because a lot of Kabbalistic thought is very, it's along those spiritual consciousness sort of lines I'd be very curious. Like we'd have to have a separate conversation sometime about that, because I know that Andy, you and I have talked, like the first time we ever did a podcast together was mostly just about like consciousness and expanding our minds and things like that, what we experience. And I'd be very curious. We should go over some of those Kabbalistic ideas and go, I've always been curious to kind of look at it because I've heard a lot of things about Kabbalah and from Kabbalah, and I'm like, this feels like my brain. Like what so it's like, I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. It's more like, it's just interesting that whoever wrote it had some sort of prominence over this data about consciousness and about the mind. And we're always saying how they're, the people we're talking about now are social engineers and social scientists. They're psychologists mostly. And it's like you said, they're studying the human species. It just seems like they've been masters at it for thousands of years already as it is, which, it's very interesting when we tie back to possible lost civilizations and we look at it like an underdog situation, don't we? Mm-hmm. Whoever we lost from this lost civilization is always like, oh yeah, too bad for them. But what if it's the criminals just hiding their own crimes?
Right. And so, in that theme of just talking about the context of time and how long this has been going on, in silent movies, one of the first movies ever done was Metropolis by Fritz Lang. And people go and watch that movie. So it kind of proves that even before movies had speaking, they were pushing this narrative because it shows all of the workers going into the mouth of the giant machine monster that they call Moshiach. It's like
wild. It's a wild movie, dude.
And
it's on
also,
Netflix. It's on Bernays' owned Netflix, so you can check it out there.
And then the other thing I wanted to say too about how long this has been going on in Israel, since at least 1882, the Rothschilds were creating stuff there. little
Mm.
communities in the Yishuv. This is the sort of the first settlements. So there's a chapter in the book Two Rothschilds in the Land of Israel, which is one of our sources, that shows one chapter called The Experiment, 1882 to 1887, and this is the first Rothschild influence there. So it goes back, decades, centuries.
Yeah, yeah, quite a bit. And I think this road will take us eventually, whether it's in this series or a future series with more individuals, more pertinent individuals into different areas of research. I want to connect it all the way back to when Israel, when that very important area of Israel was called Scythopolis,
Right.
I'm
and
interested in that too. Yeah.
being a capital Aryan city.
Right.
And who I've always been really fascinated with the idea of the chosen ones versus this idea of the quote unquote superior race. It all seems to be stemming back to the same ideology. And again, I say Aryan and Jewish, this whatever you're saying, it's all Semitic. This is all coming from,
Yeah.
they're all coming
Right.
from,
It's irrelevant.
it's all coming from
It's a
the
family
co-
squabble, dude. Somehow.
Dude, that's why I've always wanted to write a
And we're
book
part
called
of
The
it. We're
Family
part of
Feud.
it. We're like
Maybe
in the middle.
we
of
are.
it.
We're absolutely
One
part
way
of
or
it.
another.
We're the asshole cousins that are too aware of the situation at the
Yeah.
fucking family reunion or something,
Fucking
because it's
Bob
all
and-
from the Caucasus Mountains, man.
Bob
it's all
and Johnny
from
are
these people.
warring again. Bob
Yeah.
and Johnny, Uncle Bob and Uncle John are at war again.
Yeah. And so in the final
Yeah.
weeks of this, we're going to show how it went international. And you just said the Caucasus or
The Caucasus Mountains.
yeah, the Caucasus, the mountain ranges and all that area, Georgia and all of that. It's so
Yep.
key to what they did, because that's the exact area that they drew all the new borders for. Central Europe was the
Look
key.
at that.
That's what the Paris Peace Conference was all about. And so it's all the Lithuanian-Polish border. It's the Pale of Settlement. It's all of it. So
And so
get
many
to
of my
that
listeners
later.
many of my listeners who go on my deep dives with me about ancient stuff, like this whole Caucasus Mountains area is so important and so
Yep.
pertinent because
and they're still fighting
it's-
today.
it's all the same people.
They
and
set the
it
borders
is,
100
as Andy
years
said,
ago.
a family squabble, and that is
Look,
really, yeah. Look at this, yeah.
Look at the screen.
Oh yeah, man.
They were working together, by the way.
Well, because the symbols
The
didn't
final,
mean
the
what
final solution.
we're
the
sold
final
a total
solution
fiction.
wasn't eradicating them from the
No,
earth.
No,
It was Zionism.
right.
That's what the final solution.
Two sides of the same
actually
coin. Looks like.
Dude,
to me.
and the thing is people call a lot of things Nazi propaganda that in completely other contexts will prove to be real through other means. Like I'm saying, like I study really ancient territory, and all this stuff is very new, but it concludes, it's the
There you
same
go.
fucking story. It's all the same story. The swastika has never been or never was a they say it was like a Buddhist symbol. Yeah, it's only Buddhist because if you look at the description of who Buddha was, he was an Aryan. Like this is a northern symbol, and so is the star. Those two triangles represent male and female. But those are just that's just one duality, but it
Right.
represents many dualities.
Right.
And the swastika has many meanings. And I've shown, I think it's on my Instagram, but I could show it somewhere. I don't know where I could find it right off the top of my head, but I have a video of a very ancient tradition of the swastika being created when it has to do with sulfur being lit on four ends of
Saw that.
logs.
I saw that. You
And-
showed
Oh
me
yeah, you
that.
showed me that. It spins.
And when the
spins.
when the sulfur lights up and goes flaring, it starts to spin and it creates that symbol, and then it stops, and then it starts the illusion makes it spin the other way. So we have so many different narratives, like, well, this way is the right way, but then this other way is like the Nazi way. No, like none of that is true. All of it's bullshit. And even Native American cultures have a swastika symbol, and it's referred to as like the spinning logs. And the
Right.
only tradition in the world with the spinning logs is in Finland. And they say that because of the fucking barren land bridge that may have existed, Finnish people, Russian people, these Native American people in the Southwest and the Northwest, they're all from a similar origin. If you look at the Kennebec man, the Kennewick man, he's the oldest Native American we have. He's the oldest ancestor of our Native Americans. Yet he is also the oldest Caucasian we've ever found. What?
Right.
So I'm sorry to ramble, but man, this is all connected, all of it, because it's all being subverted, it's all being hidden, and none of us have all the answers, but we're putting so many damn pieces together for others out there.
Yes.
Hopefully, more of the pieces fall into place. Dwayne, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, some of our earlier work on Huxley, we identified this whole movement was to attack every aspect, every form of Western society at the same time, not one at a time, but all at the same time. And so that, we will often refer to the Stanford Research Institute, Changing Images of Man, and how that was, inspired by Huxley to find all the ways to control society. Well, we see them fulfilling all of that here. It's the same group of people, because when you look at the League of Nations and when that was created, all of these people are all cohabitating. It's all together. The Huxleys, and all these social engineers.
I got some gravy. I got some gravy for you guys before we get out of here. So,
hell yeah. This is
from
amazing.
This was from my trip. Can you see
this? Is in San Francisco.
See the picture?
You saw that in San Francisco.
Man.
Yeah, this is the Palace of Fine Arts.
Oh, get out.
I'm going to show you one more. So this is in San Francisco.
In our time era too.
Incredible.
This is right in our wheelhouse.
This was built.
Of this place.
I don't know when it was built. I think it was built a lot longer. This was supposedly in place for the 1915 Panama Pacific International Expo.
Yeah.
So the World's Fairs.
Yeah.
And this was one of many, many, many buildings, incredible buildings that were part of this fair. And this is where they were like showcasing free energy, all kinds of like interesting tech. They were, so I got to go there. I was just in the Bay Area. Got to see this. It was so incredible, just the detail. And what I wanted to show you, right? Without going, maybe some other time we can get in and do
definitely would like.
I want to show you this. I don't know. I check this picture out. We're just talking about that symbol.
So you're saying that? Okay.
So look at this. Look at the symbol. Okay. So the story is that this structure was knocked down and rebuilt in like the 60s. Do you think these swastikas are everywhere, littered throughout this structure? Do you think that like the designer would have featured like the redesign and implementation and rebuild of this structure would have included that, given what had just transpired less than 20 years before?
So
especially in the 60s.
I'm speculating here. I don't know, right? But
so you're
I don't
saying,
think it was ever demolished.
And you're saying that this shows that this structure is a lot older than they say it is?
That's what I'm speculating. Yeah.
And that's interesting
now
too,
we need
because
to
it's the only one. It's the only one that remained.
Shout out
it is. It's the only one that remained from the expo.
Yeah, everything else was gone.
Shout out to Casey from Golden Gate Starfort Command.
Yeah, he's the one who
dude,
inspired me to go here and look at.
By the way, I did reach out to him. He was in Massachusetts while you were there.
Oh, really?
Unfortunately, yeah,
I reached
in Boston.
out to him.
I didn't even get to see him, but shout out to Casey. Yeah. I did talk to him,
shout out to him.
I am going to be getting him back on very soon. Awesome. I think we actually set a date, so it's in the next couple of weeks. Andy, if you want to be there.
Yeah,
by
have me
all
on
means,
because I want to show him
because
some of these pictures.
I feel like we can. It's a good way to, recreate Indra's web, if you will, if we
Yeah.
want to stick to the mythology here, to kind of link
Look at
this
this
node.
shit, though. Look at this shit. Gravy
This
for
is
the audience.
unreal.
I
Oh,
mean, look at this,
absolutely.
dude.
Please, everybody, take in the symbolism. And
Lions. There's lions everywhere.
for those that are
These,
listening, tune
yeah,
into
for those that are
YouTube. Come on.
listening. Come
Someone
look
in
at these
someone
pictures.
someone on YouTube said, "How long has the Deep Share had a YouTube channel?" I'm like, "Come on, I've been here pretty much since the beginning, actually."
Look at how
on
big that
video.
fucking thing is, Dwayne. Look at that.
Yeah, that's
dude.
what surprised me when you showed me that picture with you standing there. I was shocked on how big it
Oh
was.
yeah, let me
This
pull
place
that
is
one up,
massive.
too. Let me pull that one up right there. That one. I think the other
Yeah.
one's better because
This
it's-
is that is
And
so
so
huge.
that's all pushing the
This
City
one.
Beautiful
Look at
movement
this.
too, right? Those expos that you're talking about, they're happening in Chicago, in New York, and they're pushing the City Beautiful movement,
City Beautiful. Yep,
right?
that's what Casey
And we
turned me
see
on
it today.
to. Yep.
A lot of
I
our
think I've-
buildings are like that.
I don't think I've actually heard that term,
Look
but
at
Dude, oh yeah. So go back and listen to one of my early episodes with Casey.
okay, okay.
About the City Beautiful
Check out
movement.
this. Check out this landscape, though. This
Yeah,
is
there you go.
this is a panorama of the expo.
Yeah.
Look at this. So here's the palace right here. What we were just looking at on
Right.
the left
It's
side
like
of
a
the screen.
fucking Zoroastrian
Right here.
city.
Here's the lagoon. Okay, all this shit.
Here's Alcatraz.
Every last building is destroyed. I think there's part of the of this building, which is like the
Looks Masonic.
I forget what they call this, some type of transit station or whatever, but it doesn't look like this.
Hmm.
This is
And
wild.
the whole story of San Francisco makes no fucking sense. And I learned a lot of what I was learning
God.
about that from Casey at
Yeah.
Golden Gate, Starfort Command, and also another channel, shout out, I am Kairos, Kairos. He does a bunch of work traveling around the Bay Area, doing the same kind of things
Really?
Casey's doing.
Nice. Just get them both on.
Man,
Dude, this
that's awesome.
this place was, oh my god, dude! Like I just felt something there, like just
Totally.
like
Like,
being
I'm
at
not
the
a mud
palace.
flood guy. I'm not into the mud flood thing, and I think Tartaria is very subversive as well. But I do think that there's absolutely shit going on here.
I think it's an
all these old
interesting
buildings.
line of Casey did a podcast where they were getting into this like the destruction of San Francisco, and like there was a quote unquote a fire and an earthquake,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
like look, that is an explosion. This was like in
Absolutely.
the early 1900s.
Who gets a picture of that if it's not an explosion?
And there's all these weird ass
Wow.
pictures of people smiling. I got some interesting ones here. Like this whole area was burned in San Francisco, and there's like, yeah, this picture. Look at this. So this whole fucking city's like basically being
That's modern
completely.
times.
No, this was at like the early like. I think let me see if I can find the panorama from it was
It's like late 1800s.
1878. There's a panorama. Okay. Let me see. I have that in here too. But this is what the cities look like after. This looks like Nagasaki or some shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what the fuck?
Look at that. That's not a fire and an earthquake, dude. That's like a firebombing.
Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Looks
all
like
subjective.
Dresden.
That's what I was
us.
saying. Yeah, Dresden or Nagasaki that basically look exactly like that.
I mean, when we get some, engineers for 9/11 Truth to like kind of take a look at this stuff, or weapons experts that it's all speculation.
And there's all these newspaper articles about it, and like apparently the fire chief got sick or some shit. Let me see if I can find that panorama real quick, and then I gotta head out and get some rest. But check
we're
this
gonna
out.
Call it soon anyway.
Yeah, let me see.
Getting late
What is
for
it
you
called?
guys.
1878 panorama, San Francisco. I'm pretty sure that'll get me there.
Thanks for the folks still hanging out live with
Yeah.
us. Still got a good group of people hanging out. Thank you.
Right on.
Show some support. Go check all of our pages out.
That's the one right there. Edward Muybridge.
Oof.
So this is like
Right.
a composite. This is a 1878, and if like you zoom into this picture, you can see like all this. Like, I mean, the story was that 30 years prior to this, there was only 1,000 people there in 1848. Then the gold rush, 1849.
Right.
A few years later, there's 25,000 people. 30 years, 1,000 people did this. Like 1,000 people and a few more. But if you like zoom into this picture, like some of these buildings are just like fucking really interesting. I mean, look at how massive just the scale of it is.
Now, is that Alcatraz in the background?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, we keep seeing different angles
that's
of
far
that.
out,
It's
man.
so creepy.
So interesting though, this whole city, man. Like
We're gonna have to meet in San Francisco, man.
hell yeah.
We'll get a motorhome and we'll
Hell
spend a
yeah.
week in San Francisco just driving around. Then we'll head to LA.
There you go.
I bet there's
Document the whole
Experience
thing.
California as the laboratory.
yeah, so that's an interesting panorama. I think there's much better ones than this out there, but this is basically kind of the gist of it. But like it makes
You should
no
put something
sense.
together on San Francisco, Andy, because
I think I
mean,
might. I think I
we
might.
all know how much history is there, especially with 60s counterculture.
I know.
Dude, yeah.
And
it's
the
very central.
UN's formulated there and all
Yeah,
this shit.
yeah.
Like, damn,
Well,
dude.
Casey dropped some interesting bombs to me
Yeah,
recently in a chat. He was
Oh,
like,
awesome.
"Yo, if we're
Awesome.
gonna talk soon, I want to talk about this and about like the island of California type stuff."
Right, the
And
island,
right.
yeah.
he's
Yeah.
gotten a lot, and some of the photographs he's shown me, it's just like it's made me like I've even asked him. I've been like, "Dude, is there any way that we're getting fucked with and this is AI, like AI art?" like can we verify these pictures are real? It's like unbelievable, like the just leading to crazy possibilities of like how much of our Midwest was just dynamited.
Right.
It's just,
That's what I'm saying too.
there's a
It's
lot
like-
of crazy stuff in there, but we've gone pretty off the rails here.
Yes, we
but,
have.
but hey, no disrespect to the off the rails,
No,
because
we
this
had
is
to actually.
beautiful. And thank you, Andy, for showing us those pictures of your trip. That's
Oh, yeah.
so
I got so many more.
magnificent. Yeah, we'll have to do more on it. And again, like we're gonna do a 10-part series here. This was episode 3. But
That was just some bonus gravy for the people
absolutely,
hanging out
Yeah,
still.
right on.
absolutely. Dwayne,
So
do you have any?
next-
Yeah, go ahead.
So for next week, we're going to get into law, sociological jurisprudence. And so this is going to
really
be probably even more influential on you than this Zionist one, or, to me, it really helped put together a lot of things when I understood how they affected law,
this is going to bring up
how
a
they
lot of
combine
interesting
sociology.
topics. Andy, will you be able to join us next week too? I hope.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Awesome.
nice. Cool.
Because I feel like we've also, just in our random conversations about conspiracies and stuff, we've talked about Black's Law book and things like that, and we've all been curious about like, Jordan Maxwell, what he says about the law of water, and maybe some of us more than others, but all of this kind of, I wonder how it's going to play in. I'm going to have these ideas in my mind when we talk about
Me too.
law and jurisprudence, because
Yeah.
we know that they also control the counterculture and the narratives that a lot of us probably took as gospel from people, charismatic leaders of the counterculture many, many times. Not to say everybody's a Fed, but come on, we know that this is how it works. So,
Well, they looked at law as the engine of social control. Now, this is what really took me aback, because I'd never really looked at law as social control, but it's obviously the most powerful form of social control, right? They're creating laws to keep people from doing things that they don't want. And
creates
so
mentalities
really-
around every one of those little
Works.
things.
It works,
Yeah.
dude.
So you
It
have,
creates the mentality, it creates personalities.
so when you think about that title, sociological jurisprudence, that's law combining with sociology. So that's the study of the human being combining with the controlling of the human being. It blew my mind and led me to really understand Larkin Rose's video, the animated one, and the Jones Plantation movie.
Yeah.
make it analogous not just to the state, but to the factory system of work and the labor union leader as the scientific expert between us and our labor, right?
Entering wedge.
That's our most powerful, most important possession, is our own ability to work and make money. And so I never really looked at that, like the labor unions, in that way before, but delving into the literature, this is how they looked at it. This is why the labor unions were created, was to have the scientific expert entering wedge between us and our labor. So that's what we're going to get into. It's actually two-parter. We'll see if we can cover both, but it may go over 2 weeks just because it's so in depth.
Yeah, I absolutely think we should take our time. So if we,
Yes.
we'll plan to go hour and a half tops, and
Yep.
then definitely hold off on the part 2 for the following week. We
Yeah.
want to do our due diligence here, but obviously we're doing that. This has
Yep.
been fantastic. This
Cool,
keeps
boys.
getting
Good to see you again,
and
Gerard.
more interesting.
too.
Yeah, great to have
to
you
be
here
back
with us
with you
again,
guys.
Andy.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Cool.
Great to be
And
back.
again, hey, thank you for all the people coming on and joining us for this live, and
Yep,
we'll
cool.
be here again
Thanks for
Monday.
contributing too.
Yeah, please, thank you. Spread the word. We're going to be doing this for the next 6 more episodes or 7 more episodes. Yeah, 7 more episodes. Yeah, I think we'll call it at that. But
Okay.
yeah, find Dwayne at bulletproofpub.com and find Andy. I'm going to tag you in all your socials and shit, and I'll get this up on the podcast.
I figured Raz
feed.
of the Expert had to wear this shirt. COVID-19
Right.
vaccine
Yeah,
makers
exactly.
are exempt from liability.
Right.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
This is not
Bingo.
medical advice, but don't do it.
Yeah, no experts here.
No, definitely not.
All right, everybody.
Some guys
Good night.
seeking truth.
Thanks,
See you
everybody.
later.
Next time. Hell yeah.